Picture this. You're stepping into Jeffrey Epstein's sprawling 21,000 square foot beast of a townhouse at 9 East 71st Street, one of the largest private homes in New York City. Before entering the home, I implore you to take a look at the outside. I've been there myself and I captured this video right here, which clearly shows a number of different security cameras watching you from almost every single angle. There are also some ghoulish looking carvings, possibly gargoyles or cherubs, creepy artistic ornamental faces that decorate the outside of Epstein's former home. But we're going back in time to a time when Epstein owned the property. Regardless, before you're even inside of the front door of Epstein's house, you feel like you're being watched. But let's go in. Right off the bat, after the 15-foot tall front door swings open and you step inside, you're hit by an extremely bizarre sight. Row after row of individually framed prosthetic eyeballs, imported straight from England and hung on the wall in the entrance of Epstein's home. These aren't some sort of artsy installation. According to reporting, these eyeballs are real medical prosthetics, originally crafted for wounded soldiers who lost their eyes in battle, probably from wars like World War II. Jeffrey Epstein seemed to have collected these eyeballs and framed them like some sort of sick trophy, turning a symbol of human suffering and recovery into this glossy, polished, absolutely unblinking wall of surveillance. It's almost like the house itself is staring you down, judging you with every step that you take. There's no known artist behind the eyeballs or someone who crafted and created this collection for Epstein. This seems to have just been something that he wanted to have installed literally right when you enter his home. Now, if that doesn't scream blackmail recording and secret surveillance, along with the faces that are watching you and the cameras outside, I don't know what does. Was this just some sort of macabre collection and interest of Epstein's, or was he telling the people who entered his home, careful, we're watching you? Well, let's continue on. Tucked into that same foyer that you see upon entering Epstein's home is a painting done in the raw, childlike style of Jean Dubuffet, the French artist famous for championing art brut, outsider art that's rough, unpolished, and drawn from the margins of society, like works by the mentally ill or completely untrained creators. It's a very interesting form of art, and Dubuffet, who lived from 1901 to 1985, meant for his art to rebel against polished academic styles, as he celebrated the primal and authentic, the real pulse of average people living and working on the streets of their countries. But Epstein's version of this art, it's unsigned, and he'd coyly dodge questions about who painted it. Likely it was a fake or a knockoff, which fit his typical pattern of phony masterpieces. In Epstein's hands, though, this piece of art became a teasing veil, hiding authenticity just like he hid so much else. As you continue on through the house, the two-story reception room looms just ahead. Walls in the study lined with photos of infamous power players, people like Woody Allen, Mohammed bin Salman, Bill Clinton, Trump, like a gallery of tainted alliances. Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, provided Jeffrey Epstein with a distinct and bizarre piece of art to hang in his study, a hand-drawn map of Israel. And also inside of the study is a signed and inscribed dollar bill done up by nobody other than Bill Gates himself, founder of Microsoft. Outside of Epstein's mansion, especially if you were to visit in the dead of winter, the heated sidewalk would melt the snow away, but inside, the chill in the home would set in over your body fast. But let's go back to that main area, the hallway with all of those eyeballs. As you walk up the main staircase in Epstein's home, the eyeballs and their stares seem to follow you up to the second story, where the real twisted show really begins. Climbing the grand staircase towards Epstein's office and bedroom, your eyes can't help but wander towards the hanging sculpture, literally dead set in the center of this open area. The sculpture itself is a life-size bronze woman in a real wedding dress, desperately gripping a rope from the chandelier, her form heavy and gazing downward in some sort of frozen peril. The artist behind this piece is unknown, but it's often online been compared to provocative works like those by Maurizio Cattelan, meant to shock viewers and spark debate amongst house guests. Here, blending bridal purity with lynching imagery, symbolizing the entrapment of women or doomed innocents. I have to say, it's a very, very striking sculpture, and it's honestly really creepy the more that you look at it. And when you consider that Epstein himself was the one who had this sculpture of a woman what looks like trying to escape, looking like she's in some sort of turmoil, wearing a wedding dress, it takes on a whole different meaning. It might represent vulnerability and commitment, but in Epstein's lair, it seems to be some sort of kinky harbinger of control, which in a weird and scary way almost mirrored the fates of the women and young girls that he allegedly trapped in his dark clutches. At the base sits the custom human chessboard, with figurines sculpted, modeled after his own staff members, mostly being women in skimpy, suggestive outfits, their legs posed provocatively like pawns in Epstein's sick game. Once again, there's no named or known artist here behind this piece, but it's bespoke, probably commissioned directly by Epstein to objectify his employees even further, turning real people in his life into playable pieces in a disturbing game. A literal representation of a power fantasy where Epstein plays the game, he moves the pieces, and he controls the board in full. Near the human chessboard looms a nearly twice life-size bronze sculpture of a completely naked African warrior, muscles rippling, fully exposed in a pose of raw dominance. Once again, the artist behind this piece is unknown, and the piece evokes tribal art traditions that symbolize strength and virility, perhaps from African sculptural heritage where warriors represent protection or conquest. Viewed through the lens of Epstein and his disturbing life, the statue becomes an almost phallic emblem of power, towering over visitors, like some sort of sentinel of his ego. Then there are the 5 oversized architect's pencils bent into twisted shapes, each cast in bronze for about $10,000. Once again, there's no artist credited for this work of art, but each of the pencils scream phallic distortion, tools of creation that have been warped, maybe mocking design or hinting at some sort of bent reality. Throughout the home, as the AC flows in the summer months, the bride's gown flutters eternally, a silent scream captured in fabric. The ascent up into Epstein's home almost feels like entering his mind, or even his supervillain lair, bars and beasts being the next sights. The second floor of Epstein's home hits you with the photorealistic prison mural. As you can see here, there's barbed wire coiling, guards looming, with Epstein smack in the center like a king trapped within his own cell. Commissioned anonymously after his 2008 conviction for having the artist, once again, is unknown, but perhaps this piece was commissioned as a nod to hyperrealism masters like Chuck Close, but twisted into self-mockery. The meaning behind the art? Well, Epstein bragged at the time that it was for the possibility of going to jail again, turning his future potential punishment into artful foresight and some sort of sick joke. I'm sure that when Epstein had this art created for himself, he could have never imagined the disturbing, dark twist that his life would have taken at the very end, when he died in a prison cell only miles from where that fateful piece of art depicting him in prison sat. The massage room on the second floor is covered with paintings of naked women, and as you can see in pictures from this room, there are shelves full of lube and a ball and chain. It seems like BDSM was normalized in this space. Inside of Epstein's office sits a giant taxidermied tiger with its fangs eternal, eyes glassy, once again with an unknown source. But obviously, taxidermy often symbolizes the conquest of humans over nature. For hunters, something like this is a trophy. Here, we can assume that it was for Epstein's beastly dominance. On the piano, a stuffed black poodle perches, dusty and odd. Epstein, when talking to the press, often quipped that no decorator would suggest this poodle, wanting folks to ponder what it means to stuff a dog. Perhaps, by a taxidermist like those preserving pets, this could have symbolized the unnatural preservation or emasculation of nature. In the red chair lounge upstairs, a dog statue besides its feces mocks life. Similar to Jersey Kenar's fountain, another famous piece of work, a bronze poop coil honors the dog's waist, urging cleanup. Kenar, a Polish-American artist, meant his art piece as a humorous piece of public art. However, once again, as with Epstein, we can assume that his version twists morality into some sort of gross whimsy. These preserved creatures that are littering the second floor of Epstein's home scream out of control and perceived control over life and death itself. But it's in the bedrooms of Epstein's home where petals hide predators. Epstein's bedroom suite, a floral overload. Laura Ashley beach vibes in white and blue, just like on his island, with massive flowers exploding on the walls, like some sort of 90s excess gone sterile. But the bathrooms themselves hold horror. In one bathroom sits a nude painting of a small-breasted woman, the age of the subject unknown, along with the artist, perhaps painted in the vein of realist nudes, symbolizing vulnerability. Disturbingly, according to one victim of Epstein's named Jennifer Arouse, who was 15 years old at the time that Epstein told her while her in the bathroom that she herself resembled the woman in the painting, which turned the art into some sort of tool of comparison and violation. As you can see in photographs and video of Epstein's bedrooms as well, hidden cameras eye the bed, capturing all the action that ever occurred in that room. Behind the desk is Kees van Dongen's Femme Fatale from 1905, an oil painting of a woman cupping her exposed breast, with the nipple bold. Van Dongen, who lived from 1877 to 1968, was a Dutch-French Fauvist, known for garish, sensuous portraits of Parisian nightlife, paintings that depicted and dancers and more, meant to capture raw allure and at the same time danger. Femme Fatale embodies seductive peril. The painting depicts a woman wielding her body as power, and Epstein bought the painting for millions anonymously. Flowers facade the filth within the room, with petals framing some sort of perverted pleasure. Also hanging prominently in Epstein's home is Patrina Ryan Clade's Parsing Bill, an oil painting from 2012 that depicts Bill Clinton in a blue dress, a nod to his Monica Lewinsky scandal, and red heels, lounging in the Oval Office. Ryan Cleed, an Australian artist and New York Academy of Art alumni, created this piece of art as student satire, parsing meaning analyzing, dissecting Clinton's scandals with a lens of humor. Epstein, however, displayed this painting as some sort of sick and twisted trophy, turning the joke into something sinister. As we know, Epstein and Clinton were extremely close friends, and it's been alleged many times that Clinton was complicit in Epstein's darker proclivities and activities. So to have a painting of Bill Clinton in a dress in the Oval Office hanging in your house is just bizarre to say the least. But it should also be stated here that many people online and people who visited Epstein's house in person have publicly stated that it seems like a number of pieces of art that Epstein had in his homes were fake. They were knockoffs. For example, inside of Epstein's home was a supposedly fake Max Weber Cubist painting which echoed Weber's abstract experiments in form. Also, remember, there was that Dubuffet mimic painting downstairs that many believe is fake as well. Also inside of the home, disturbingly, are some what seem to be replicas of a series of paintings called Underaged Rodins. Paintings by artist Auguste Rodin, which depicted sensual nudes. Paintings like The Kiss, which apparently, and according to the artist, celebrated human form, but celebrated the bodies of youth. That's why the series is called Underaged Rodins. It's essentially painted CP or CSAM materials. Epstein, of course, would have definitely wanted some art like that in his own home. And it's interesting because the presence of this fake or allegedly fake art shows that Epstein himself had some sort of disdain for real value. Clearly, if you know the Epstein story and you know anything about him, he had more than enough money to be able to afford the real thing. And yet, for some reason, he never went for it. He seemed to have, in many of these cases, gone for the cheaper, knockoff varieties. These artistic forgeries flaunt a sort of hypocrisy within Epstein, as he used art as some sort of facade, a way to trick people into thinking he may have been more intelligent or artistically inclined than he really was. But inside of the massage room, the hands-on horror really amps up. Just take a look at the massage room itself. We talked about this briefly before, and as you know, Epstein typically liked to the underage victims, and by starting out with a massage, that was his big thing, so we can assume that there were some absolutely unholy, absolutely horrific things done to older men by children in this room. Not only Epstein either, there were plenty of different visitors to specifically this New York mansion owned by Epstein, including Prince Andrew, who actually lied about visiting the location at one point, even though video cameras actually captured him lurking in the shadows inside the doorway of the mansion. It's a very creepy video. Inside of the massage room, though, hangs 15-foot artwork depicting a naked girl. A photo or a painting, we don't really know what it is, with once again the artist being unknown, with the piece described as, quote, artistic, not by one of the victims. But in this space, this painting or picture being hung up in this room specifically by Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, well, it turns the work of art into a work of pure exploitation. Only God knows exactly what happened inside of that massage room and who took advantage of who, but we know that it happened not only dozens, but hundreds, possibly thousands, probably thousands of times. And as you can see, there were lube shelves all throughout the massage room and a ball and chain, tools that could have been used for pleasure or for torment. Obviously, when you know the history of Epstein, who he was, what he was doing, and who he was doing these things to, it turns this photo or painting from art to assault. Then there's Damien Loeb's Little Miss Pink Tomato from 1995, a hyper-real oil painting of 8 young girls in swimsuits at a pageant, bathed under harsh lights, standing in front of an ambiguous backdrop. Damien Loeb, born 1970, is an American artist who draws from cinematic realism. And according to him, this painting critiqued child exploitation in pageants, highlighting the girl's innocence and how it was commodified. However, once again, as we see here with Epstein, there is a pattern to the art he seems to want to collect, and it seems like he turned this critique of exploitation into a creepy endorsement of the activities being critiqued with the painting itself. The oil violation is normalized here in Epstein's home, and the presence of this painting within Epstein's cursed walls is not only horrific, but it's stomach-churning and disgusting. So Epstein's home itself, we can analyze Epstein's home for days, talking about all the autographs and the pictures and the bizarre things and the cameras and everything else found in there. There's also, according to witnesses, a room right when you walk into Epstein's front hallway. I believe it was to the right. I could be wrong on that, but it was right there near the entrance. And people have testified that when they walked into that room on accident, they saw essentially like floor to ceiling computer monitors, like security cameras, somebody recording every square inch of the house at all times. But it really paints a picture. Epstein's got oil paintings of underage girls. He's got nudes throughout the house, a sculpture of what looks like a woman trying to escape. He's got a chess set sculpted after his own assistants of scantily clad women that he's controlling, an entire wall of eyeballs. I mean, this is the realm of the incredibly bizarre. But since we're only analyzing Epstein's disturbing art taste here, we're going to move to the Palm Beach house. As you probably know at this point, when Epstein was arrested and his Palm Beach home was finally raided by authorities, what the authorities found inside of that house was absolutely disturbing. There were nudes galore spread all throughout the home, photos of underage girls clothed and naked scattered throughout the property, paintings of women with their legs splayed, faceless, muscular nudes in surrender, and so much more. For example, one of the paintings that is very eerie and disturbing is that of Lemore Gasco's untitled Nude Woman from Behind, an oil painting commissioned specifically by Jeffrey Epstein. Lemore Gasco, an Israeli-American artist, typically paints stark figures. This painting, though, was sold as being Epstein commissioned. We can interpret the painting in a number of ways. When you take a look at the art itself, you can see that this is essentially vulnerability being viewed anonymously. And the fact that this is a nude woman facing away from the person viewing the art turns this into some sort of sick, voyeuristic power play art. Not necessarily if it was art alone, but the fact that it was art commissioned by Epstein and hung in his house. Obviously, you have to interpret these works with a completely different lens. Then there's a print of a photo by artist Lawrence Sackman. In the photo, as you can see, there are a pair of spread nude legs, and the photo is in black and white. The photo is by British photographer Lawrence Sackman, born 1948, an artist known for his erotic nudes, which allegedly capture intimacy. Once again, this photograph hanging in Epstein's home causes it to take on a whole darker sort of meaning. Then there's the bust of a woman's hanging on Epstein's wall. This is incredibly crude and reduces a woman's body to nothing more than parts. And through this art, Epstein seems to be using it as a catalog of conquest. Unbelievably bizarre, and as you can see, there is a theming to a lot of the art that Epstein collects. Frequently nudes, compromising positions, focus on body parts in specific. It's really, really weird, very obviously themed stuff. And going through the footage that the local police departments in Florida released showing their journey through Epstein's mansion in Palm Beach, you can see a lot of different, extremely bizarre and just strange things. In one shot, there is some sort of visible medical equipment that Epstein seems to have collected and kept around, potentially as an art piece. There are sets of strange and unexplained blueprints that we don't know the meaning behind. There are lots of photos of Ghislaine Maxwell meeting Fidel Castro, Epstein and Maxwell meeting the Pope, lots of photos, but I don't really count those as art. There are plenty of bizarre paintings depicting nude images, just other strange paintings and works of art that I couldn't really track down any more information on. And there's also a strange statue depicting a blindfolded archer. Now, I don't really know the meaning of the statue of an archer that's blindfolded. I did find one article online that discussed the fact that maybe this is a lesson from some sort of Zen guru, a teaching lesson about not aiming for something that you want without focus or the ability to focus on it. I don't really know. It could have some other Greek meaning, but regardless, it is very strange. And also in the Palm Beach home, as you can see in some of the footage, Epstein had baby powder throughout, and it's known that Epstein didn't have any children. Very strange. But we still have to press on, because one of the weirdest places, probably the weirdest place when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, in my opinion, even stranger than the island itself, is his mysterious ranch in New Mexico, Zoro Ranch. Now, we're going to talk about Zoro Ranch in an upcoming episode of the show at length, because it was at Zoro Ranch where Epstein was allegedly conducting human cloning experiments, attempting to create a superhuman race of individuals cloned with his own DNA. There are all these crazy, bizarre accusations about Epstein that don't just come from conspiracy, threads online. These are accusations that were reported on by major news outlets, from CNN to The Guardian. This is like known stuff that Epstein was into, and it's weirder than you can even possibly imagine, but it needs a whole video to get into. But we want to focus today very quickly before we end today's video on the art found at Zoro Ranch itself. Inside of the basement of Zoro Ranch, which is an extremely isolated property in the desert of New Mexico, is a 5x6 foot painting that shows a young girl wearing a wedding ring cuddling a snarling lion/tiger. The artist behind this piece of art is unknown, but it evokes obviously a surreal intimacy with danger. Could this perhaps symbolize some sort of predatory marriage? I mean, the girl definitely looks younger than 18 years old in my opinion, and yet she's wearing a wedding ring. Could this be some sort of a shout out to child marriage, child brides? And obviously, the fact that this young girl is wearing a wedding ring means that that wedding ring is definitely important in the interpretation of the painting. So is the artist trying to get you to ponder over this marriage between a predator and a young child? I don't really know, but it's bizarre. Workers that actually worked at Epstein's Zoro Ranch have even gone public and gone to the press and stated that not only this painting itself, but the entire property gave them a generally creepy vibe. Also very interesting, within Zoro Ranch, there's actually a skeleton in a closet. Now, this was related by Ghislaine Maxwell that this skeleton was placed in the closet as a prop to scare art students who were visiting Zoro Ranch. She even stated that she was disappointed that none of the art students were fazed by the discovery of this skeleton in the closet, as she said that art kids study bones. She said that this had no deep meaning, it was just some sort of prank. But you cannot at the same time glaze past the meaning of the phrase skeleton in the closet, sins in the past, hidden truths, things you've never talked about, dark things that you did in the past that have never come to light. That's the entire phrase. He's got some skeletons in the closet. Epstein literally had a skeleton in the closet at his house. You can't make this up. Then there are two different works, two different paintings by artist Maria Farmer. Farmer, who was born around 1969 or 70, is a former victim turned artist who created both of these works unpaid. So obviously having a former victim who created art in Epstein's home is incredibly bizarre, especially when you know that the artist was once a victim of the same crime that Epstein and Maxwell were guilty of committing against other victims. Some people have interpreted the exoticism of the painting symbolizing or meaning some sort of deeper allure, but when hung in the home of Epstein and Maxwell, it now symbolizes exploitation, re-victimizing a victim who was already victimized in the past. There's also the falsies bag at dinner that tested boundaries. Now, interesting, Jeffrey Epstein himself was a board member at the New York Academy of Art from 1987 to 1994, and was good friends with the founder, Stuart Pivar, who was even described as being Epstein's best pal until scandals began to emerge and surround Epstein like a black cloud. Eileen Guggenheim of the Guggenheim Museum pushed Maria Farmer to sell her art for cheap, and seemed to ignore her past of choosing to re-victimize her in the form of some sort of art slavery, if you want to call it that. After Epstein was released from prison, he donated $30,000 to the New York Academy of Art in order to secure himself some fundraiser tickets. The president of the New York Academy of Art, Kratz, at the time, regretted giving those tickets to Epstein with hindsight, but the Academy accepted his donation back then, even though it was dirty money. Regardless, Epstein also donated $800,000 to the MIT Media Lab. Interestingly, in the past, Eileen Guggenheim herself actually sent some of her alumni to Epstein's Zoro Ranch so that they could paint murals for Epstein. And at the time of his arrest, those murals still dotted the walls. Interestingly though, there are some other things that we need to point out that we've seen in Epstein's houses across the world that are really, really disturbing once again in hindsight. And this extends beyond actual painted art or art pieces into the world of literary art, musical art, and so much more. For example, in one of Epstein's properties, he had a copy of the book Training with Miss Abernathy, which essentially, if you water it down, is some sort of a textbook for erotic slaves. There was also a book called Slavecraft, which Epstein bought, which mapped slavery and servitude and essentially taught the reader how to create a slave. These were purchased in 2005 through Amazon and sent to Epstein's Palm Beach house. One victim reported after being by Jeffrey Epstein that he shoved a book called Massages for Dummies right in her face, which again is just another disturbing thing for him to have owned. Then there's a first edition of the book Lolita by Nabokov seen on one of the desks in Epstein's New York mansion. Obviously, if you don't know what Lolita is, it is one of the most infamous artistic film works of all time. It's essentially a book about an old man falling in love romantically with a young, very young, underage girl and their relationship. Epstein seemed to have had an obsession with intellectualizing, which is another thing we're going to talk about in a video in the near future. Also, a while back, Epstein's Spotify playlists were leaked to the press after someone identified his Spotify account. He had songs on there like Hot for Teacher, My Heart Belongs to Daddy, tracks by Louis C.K., a comedian who has also been accused of impropriety, and so much more. It also should be noted that on one of his playlists, Epstein had the song Little Girls by Oingo Boingo. Look into that song and its meaning, and I guarantee you will be a little more than disturbed. The full picture, though, of all of these artistic collections and pieces scattered throughout Epstein's properties, and this is just a small sampling of everything that I'm sure was in all of his properties or even in storage or different areas that we don't really still know about. The full picture is of a perverse palette. I mean, Epstein's tastes were incredibly bizarre. There were skeletons hanging in his closets, the eyeballs of English soldiers watching and judging house guests, the fakes of paintings that rebelled falsely, a bronze bride hanging from the ceiling, attempting to escape and trapped eternally, chess pawns shaped like Epstein's staff members dressed in skimpy clothing, poodle pondering stuffing, conquered tigers, and prison murals depicting Epstein literally in prison, and also plenty of pieces of art depicting themes, and once again, underage children, specifically girls. From New York City to Zoro Ranch, Epstein had a wide and expansive collection of very unique and disturbing art, and to me it offers a glimpse into his mind, his state of mind, and who he was as a person. It really seemed like he was sending a message with this art. I mean, some of the stuff, like the eyeballs on the wall, the messaging is so incredibly blatant. You're being watched the moment you step through the door. In addition to the books that he had on his shelves, everything within Epstein's properties, when you really get down to analyzing them and looking at them, every single thing you see could potentially become a clue. But I urge you guys, please return in the next few weeks because I will be doing an in-depth episode on Epstein's Zoro Ranch, and it is more than disturbing. The story is going to shock you down to your very core. But if you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving me a comment and a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, be sure to share out these videos so that more people can see them and more people can start learning the full history of Epstein and the enigma behind him and what he was and what he represented and who he worked for and who he provided children to, because it's really important. It's really important stuff. And as always, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm not planning on going anywhere. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And if you want to see where I gathered the information for today's episode, please check the resources link that is in the description of today's video. Thank you guys for watching. Keep that tinfoil hat on. Always stay suspicious. Question everything. And I'll see y'all next week.